Storm howled outside all night. The rejected Omega sheltered a wolf who never left at dawn. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Lana sat in the small cottage, staring out the window as the storm howled outside. The wind screamed through the trees, and the rain lashed at the windows like a relentless force of nature. It had been like this all night, and it seemed like the world was caught in a violent grip of the storm. Inside, it was warm, but the coldness in Lana's heart seemed to match the icy winds outside. Rejected by her pack, her family, and even the world itself, Lana's life had become one of solitude and survival. Her once bright future, filled with dreams of love and acceptance, had been shattered. No one wanted her. No one saw her worth. The world looked at her, a blind Omega, and saw nothing but weakness. Her wolf lay dormant, a constant reminder of her failure. Her pack had turned their backs on her, and so she had retreated into the woods, finding solace in the quiet isolation of her little cottage. But tonight, the storm was different. Tonight, it felt like something was calling her, pulling her toward the wild, untamed night. As she sat by the fire, the sound of a soft whimpering reached her ears. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but as the sound persisted, her heart skipped a beat. It was coming from outside. Hesitantly, she rose to her feet and grabbed her cloak. Her instincts told her to stay inside, to remain safe and warm, but something deeper inside her urged her to go. Lana stepped out into the storm, the wind stinging her face as she moved toward the source of the sound. She followed the faint whimpering until she reached the edge of the forest, where she found him. A wolf, his black fur matted with blood, lay curled up in the mud. His body was bruised, battered, and barely breathing. Without thinking, Lana knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she gently touched his side. He was still alive. Her heart swelled with compassion as she carefully lifted the injured wolf into her arms and made her way back to her cottage. The storm raged on, but Lana didn't feel it. All she could feel was the warmth of the wolf's body against hers, and the strange sense of purpose that had awakened inside her. She had to help him. She had to save him. Once inside, Lana carefully laid the wolf on the floor and began to tend to his wounds. She was no healer, but she had learned the basics over the years. As she worked, she couldn't help but wonder about the wolf. His eyes had an intelligence to them, a deep understanding that seemed to go beyond any animal. There was something about him that felt different. And then, as the night dragged on and the storm showed no sign of relenting, something miraculous happened. The wolf shifted, his form growing and changing before Lana's eyes. In a moment, the creature that had once been a wolf was now a man. A man with silver-gray eyes and a presence that filled the room with an energy she couldn't describe. His breathing was still shallow, but there was something about him that made Lana's heart race. He was no ordinary man. He was something more. And as he stirred, his eyes locked onto hers, and a spark of recognition flared between them. But Lana wasn't sure what it meant. All she knew was that her life was about to change. Forever. Lana stood frozen in the dimly lit room, her breath caught in her throat as the man before her stirred. The wolf, now a man, lay still for a moment longer, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. His silver-gray eyes flickered open, and for a brief second, they locked onto hers. She could feel a strange connection, like a thread between them that neither could explain. Her heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. She had known, deep down, that the wolf wasn't just a normal creature. There was something about him, something different. But to see him now, as a man, was something beyond her understanding. The storm outside continued to howl, the wind rattling the windows, but in that moment, everything felt still. The man's eyes softened as he struggled to sit up, his hand reaching for the floor to steady himself. Lana instinctively moved closer, her hand hovering over him in case he fell, but he didn't. Instead, he let out a low growl, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "Where am I?" His voice was deep, rough, and strained, as though he hadn't spoken in years. Lana's throat tightened, and she could barely find her voice to answer. You're in my cottage, she said, her voice trembling. I found you outside in the storm. You were hurt, and I brought you in. The man's gaze shifted to her, studying her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. You saved me, he asked, his voice softer now, filled with something she couldn't quite place. She nodded, still unsure of what to make of the situation. I did what I could. I couldn't just leave you out there. The man looked down at his hands, which were still trembling slightly. I owe you my life, he said quietly. Lana shook her head. I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have done the same. But as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this encounter than she could comprehend. There was something about him, a power that she couldn't deny. He wasn't just a man, he was something more. The man shifted again, this time more easily. He seemed to be recovering quickly, despite the extent of his injuries. Lana watched in awe as his body seemed to heal before her eyes. The cuts on his arms, the bruises on his skin, all of them were slowly fading, as though his body was being restored by some unseen force. Who are you? She asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. The man paused, his expression turning serious. My name is Elias, he said, his voice low and controlled. I am not what you think I am. Lana's brows furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Elias sighed, his eyes distant. I am the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. But I've been cursed. My true form is no longer what it once was. That is why I was out there, in the storm. I was trying to find someone who could help me break this curse. Lana's mind raced as the weight of his words sank in. The Alpha King? The leader of all the wolves in the Northern Territories? But why would he be here, in the form of a wolf? And why had he been cursed? Her heart pounded in her chest as a new realization hit her. The man before her wasn't just a stranger. He was someone with immense power, someone who could change her life forever. But why had fate brought him to her? Why had she been the one to save him? Elias looked at her, his gaze filled with something she couldn't quite place. I know this is a lot to take in, he said, but you've already done more for me than anyone ever has. And now, I need your help. I need you to help me break this curse. Lana felt a rush of emotions flood through her. She had always dreamed of something more, of a life beyond the rejection and loneliness she had known. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She didn't know how to respond, didn't know if she should believe him. But in her heart, she felt something stirring, something deep and powerful. She had saved him for a reason. And somehow, she knew that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. I'll help you, she whispered, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. I'll help you break the curse. Elias's eyes softened with gratitude. Thank you, he said quietly. You have no idea what this means to me. As he spoke, a strange warmth seemed to fill the room, and Lana felt the weight of the moment settle into her chest. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of a journey that would take her far beyond the life she had known. A journey that would change everything. Lana had no idea what she was getting herself into, but she had made a promise, and now there was no turning back. As the days passed, she found herself falling deeper into the mystery of Elias, the man who had once been a wolf, now bound by a curse. Every day, she helped him heal, tending to his wounds, providing food and shelter, all the while feeling an unspoken connection between them. Elias, for his part, seemed to be recovering at an alarming rate. His strength was returning, and the once hidden signs of his true power began to show through in his eyes, in his presence, and in his every movement. But despite his physical recovery, the emotional toll of his curse remained. Elias spent much of his time lost in thought, his mind clearly struggling with the weight of his past. One night, as the moon hung high in the sky, Lana couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her mind racing with the events of the past week, her heart torn between the man she had helped and the growing fear of what the future might hold. She knew Elias's curse was not something easily undone, and yet, a part of her couldn't help but believe that somehow, together, they could find a way to break it. That night, as she stared out the window, lost in her thoughts, she heard a soft knock at the door. Startled, she rose quickly and opened it to find Elias standing there, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Lana, he said softly, his voice low and filled with unspoken emotion. I need to tell you something. Lana's heart skipped a beat, but she motioned for him to enter, and he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Elias spoke. I can feel it, he said, his voice rough. The curse, it's growing stronger. The more I stay here, the more it consumes me. I'm not sure how much longer I can fight it. Lana's breath caught in her throat. What are you saying? She asked, her voice trembling with fear. Elias turned to face her, his eyes filled with sorrow. I'm saying that if this curse isn't broken soon, I won't be able to control it. I could hurt you. I could hurt everyone. The words hit Lana like a slap, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She had never seen Elias like this before, vulnerable, scared, lost. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to him. No, she said softly, her voice filled with conviction. You won't hurt me. We'll figure this out together. You don't have to do this alone. Elias looked at her, his gaze softening, but doubt still clouded his eyes. I wish I could believe that, Lana, he said quietly. But I'm not the man I used to be. I don't know how much longer I can keep this monster inside me contained. Lana shook her head, stepping closer. You're not a monster, Elias, she said, her voice firm. You're just a man who's been cursed, and I'm going to help you break it. We'll find a way. Together. For a moment, there was silence, and then Elias's shoulders slumped as the weight of her words seemed to sink in. He stepped forward, taking her hands in his grip strong but gentle. I don't deserve your help, he whispered, but I don't know where else to turn. Lana squeezed his hands, a surge of warmth flooding through her as she looked up into his silver-gray eyes. You deserve more than you think, Elias. You deserve love, freedom, and a chance to live without this curse hanging over you. And I'm going to make sure you get it. Elias closed his eyes, as if savoring the moment. When he opened them again, there was a new determination in his gaze. Thank you, Lana, he said softly. You're giving me a reason to keep fighting. She smiled, though a part of her still felt the weight of what lay ahead. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know how they would break the curse, or even if they could. But for the first time since they had met, Lana felt a spark of hope. Together, they could face whatever came next. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cottage, a quiet resolve settled over them. They were no longer just two strangers brought together by chance. They were partners, bound by a shared goal, and together, they would fight for Elias's freedom, no matter the cost. The days passed, and with each passing moment, Lana and Elias grew closer, their bond strengthening with every challenge they faced together. Elias, despite his doubts, found himself relying on Lana more and more. She had become his anchor in the storm, the one person who believed in him when he could hardly believe in himself. As they worked to uncover the secrets of his curse, they spent long hours in the quiet of the cottage, poring over ancient texts and searching for any clue that might lead them to a way to break the curse that held Elias in its grip. But even as they made progress, there were moments when Elias's old self, the powerful, regal Alpha King, began to surface, and Lana could see the inner battle raging within him. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Elias looked at Lana, his silver-gray eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Lana, he said quietly, his voice rough, I've never known anyone like you. You've given me hope, when all I had was darkness. Lana looked up at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of warmth and concern. Elias, she said softly, you don't have to thank me. I'm doing this because I want to. You've been through so much, and you don't deserve to carry this burden alone. Elias reached out and gently took her hand in his touch sending a spark of warmth through her. I don't deserve you, he whispered. You've been nothing but kind to me, and yet, I've put you in danger. The curse, it's not just affecting me. It's affecting everything around me. And if we can't break it soon, I'm afraid I'll lose control. I don't want to hurt you, Lana. Lana squeezed his hand, her gaze steady. You won't hurt me, she said, her voice firm. I trust you, Elias. I trust that we can find a way to break this curse, and that together, we can defeat whatever darkness is inside you. Elias looked at her, his expression softening. You're the only one who's ever trusted me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And for that, I'll fight with everything I have. I won't let this curse take me, not while I have you by my side. The words hung in the air between them, a promise, a vow, that neither of them knew how to keep, but both of them knew was the only way forward. That night, as they settled into bed, the storm outside began to calm, the howling winds gradually fading into a gentle breeze. Lana lay awake for a long time, her mind racing with thoughts of the journey ahead. They were getting closer, she could feel it, but there was still so much they didn't know. And as much as she believed in Elias, as much as she wanted to be the one to help him, there was a part of her that feared what might happen if they failed. What would happen to Elias? What would happen to her? And yet, despite the fear that gnawed at her, she couldn't help but believe that together, they could conquer anything. The next day, they set out to find more answers, traveling deeper into the forest in search of an old hermit who was rumored to have knowledge of curses. The journey was long and exhausting, but Lana never once faltered, not when Elias was by her side. And Elias, despite his struggles, found strength in her presence. They had become a team, working together to unravel the mystery of the curse, and with each step they took, their bond grew stronger. When they finally found the hermit, an old woman living in a secluded cabin deep in the woods, they were met with a challenge of their own. The woman was wary of them at first, but when Elias revealed his true identity, she seemed to recognize the weight of his curse and agreed to help them. She spoke of a powerful artifact, a relic that could potentially break the curse, but warned them that it would not be easy to obtain. It was hidden deep within a sacred temple, guarded by a series of trials meant to test the strength of those who sought it. Elias and Lana exchanged a look, both of them knowing that the trials would be their next obstacle. But they were ready. They had to be. The hermit handed them a small map, her weathered hands shaking slightly as she passed it to them. "This is the way," she said in a raspy voice. "But be warned, the trials will not be kind. Only the strongest will survive." Elias nodded solemnly, and Lana, her heart racing, couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. Together, they would face whatever came next, and they would break the curse, no matter the cost. The journey to the sacred temple was treacherous, filled with obstacles that tested their strength and determination at every turn. Elias and Lana navigated the dense forest, their path often obscured by the thick underbrush and towering trees that seemed to block out the sun. The map the hermit had given them was old, its edges frayed, and the ink faded in places, but it guided them forward, step by step. As the days passed, they grew closer to their destination, but with each mile, the weight of the trials ahead loomed over them. The thought of what they might face in the temple both excited and terrified Lana. The trials, as the hermit had warned, were meant to challenge everything they believed in. The forest seemed to grow darker as they moved deeper into the heart of the land, and the air grew thick with tension, as though the world itself was holding its breath. They had stopped to rest for the night, a small fire crackling softly between them, when Elias spoke, his voice low and reflective. "Lana," he said, his gaze far away, "I've spent so much of my life hiding from what I am. I've built walls around myself, walls that even I couldn't break down. But with you, I feel like I'm finally seeing the world as it is. I don't have to pretend anymore." Lana looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. Elias's words meant more to her than he knew. They had both been hiding from their pasts, running from the things that haunted them. But together, they had found something real, something worth fighting for. "You don't have to hide anymore, Elias," she said, her voice steady. "Not from me. Not from anyone." Elias's silver-gray eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. They had both come so far, and no matter what lay ahead, they knew they were in this together. As they resumed their journey the next morning, the weight of the trials grew heavier in their minds. The map led them to the base of a steep mountain, where the entrance to the temple was hidden deep within the rocks. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence of the forest broken only by the sound of their footsteps. The path ahead was treacherous, a series of narrow ledges that stretched high above a vast chasm. "Are you ready?" Lana asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the perilous path before them. Elias nodded, his jaw set in determination. "I was born ready." They began the climb, each step more difficult than the last. The wind howled through the mountain pass, and the rocks beneath their feet felt slick with moisture. But they pressed on, their focus sharp, their resolve unwavering. As they reached the top, they saw it. A massive stone door carved with ancient runes, its surface worn by time. The entrance to the temple was before them. The trials awaited. The door was heavy, but with Elias's strength, they managed to push it open. Inside, the temple was bathed in a soft, ethereal light, its walls lined with ancient carvings that seemed to glow in the dimness. The air was thick with magic, and Lana could feel it humming in her veins, a tangible force that made her skin prickle with energy. "This is it," Elias said, his voice filled with awe. "We've come this far." They stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash. The sound echoed through the temple, and the air seemed to shift. A low, rumbling voice filled the space, its origin impossible to determine. "Only those worthy may proceed. To break the curse, you must prove your strength, your heart, and your soul. Fail, and you will never leave this place." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and Lana's heart pounded in her chest. She had come this far, but now, the true test was about to begin. "Are you ready?" Elias asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that flickered in his eyes. Lana took a deep breath, her hand finding his. "Together," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll make it through together." The first trial began, and they found themselves in a vast hall, surrounded by shadows. The walls seemed to close in on them as they walked forward, the floor shifting beneath their feet. They were no longer just fighting for the curse to be broken. They were fighting for their future, for their chance at a life without fear, without darkness. The trials had begun, but they would face them head on, and they would not be defeated. Not now. Not ever. The first trial was unlike anything Lana and Elias had ever experienced. As they stepped into the vast hall, the walls seemed to close in, and the shadows stretched out like fingers reaching for them. The floor beneath their feet shifted, moving as though alive, and the air was thick with tension. Every step they took seemed to echo in the empty space, and they could feel the weight of the trial pressing down on them. A voice, deep and commanding, filled the air once more. "To pass this trial, you must face your greatest fears. Only by overcoming them will you be allowed to proceed." Lana's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She turned to Elias, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "What do you think this means?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias's expression was stoic, but she could see the flicker of doubt in his silver-gray eyes. "We're about to find out," he replied, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The shadows around them seemed to grow thicker, darker, and then, without warning, they were surrounded. Lana's breath caught in her throat as the room shifted, the once still walls now moving like a living thing. The shadows took form, twisting and shifting into terrifying figures, monstrous creatures, dark versions of their own fears and insecurities. Lana could see them now, her own fears manifesting before her eyes. The first creature, a twisted figure with eyes that glowed like fire, stepped toward her. It was her greatest fear, rejection, loneliness, the feeling of being abandoned. The creature loomed over her, its presence suffocating, and for a moment, she felt herself frozen, paralyzed by the weight of her fear. But then, she felt Elias's hand on hers, his grip steady and warm, grounding her. "You're not alone," he whispered, his voice like a lifeline in the darkness. With his words, Lana found the strength to move. She stepped forward, facing the creature that represented her deepest fear. It snarled, its fiery eyes burning with contempt. But Lana stood tall, no longer paralyzed. She was not the weak, rejected Omega she had once been. She was stronger now, and with Elias by her side, she would not be defeated. The creature lunged at her, but with a wave of her hand, it dissolved into the shadows from which it came, vanishing into the darkness. Lana exhaled a shaky breath, her heart still racing, but she knew she had passed the first test. Elias was beside her, his face set in determination. "You did it," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "We did it," she corrected, her voice filled with quiet strength. But before they could catch their breath, the shadows shifted again, and another figure emerged. This time, it was Elias's fear. A dark version of himself, twisted and corrupted by the curse, stood before him, its eyes glowing with malice. The curse had taken so much from him, and this figure embodied the darkness that had consumed him over the years. Elias took a step back, his expression faltering for the briefest moment, but Lana squeezed his hand, her voice firm and unwavering. "You're not that man," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're not defined by your past. You're not the curse. You are Elias, and you have the power to overcome this." Elias's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the figure in front of him seemed to waver, its form flickering. The darkness that had once consumed him seemed to recede, and with a growl, the figure dissolved into the air, leaving only the faintest trace of shadow. Elias stood there for a moment, his breath ragged, but then he turned to Lana, his face softening. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I never would have been able to face that without you." Lana smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "We're in this together," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We always will be." The shadows receded, and the room returned to its eerie stillness. The first trial was over, but neither Lana nor Elias felt victorious, not yet. They had faced their fears, but they knew there were more trials ahead. The curse was still not broken, and the path forward would be filled with more challenges. But for the first time in a long time, they felt like they were ready to face whatever came next, together. As they stepped forward, the second trial awaited them. But this time, they were no longer just two people fighting against the darkness. They were partners, stronger together than apart, and they would break the curse, no matter the cost. The second trial was even more daunting than the first, and as Lana and Elias entered the next chamber, they felt the weight of the challenge bearing down on them. The air was thick with a heavy, suffocating pressure, and the silence was almost unbearable. There were no shadows this time, no eerie creatures to face, but instead, the trial was something far more personal, far more intimate. A voice echoed in the cavernous space, deep and resonant, sending a chill through both of them. "This trial will test the strength of your heart. You will be faced with the truth of your desires, and to proceed, you must choose what you value most, yourself or the one you love." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Lana's heart began to race, her mind whirling with the implications of the trial. What did it mean? What did they have to choose? Elias's hand tightened around hers, his warm grip grounding her. "Lana," he said, his voice soft but filled with uncertainty, "I don't know what this is going to be, but we'll get through it together, like we always do." Lana nodded, but the fear in her heart was undeniable. What would this trial ask of them? And what if the choice they had to make would tear them apart? They walked further into the chamber, the floor now shimmering with a strange, ethereal light that seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. The path ahead of them was lined with mirrors, their surfaces reflecting not just their physical forms, but something deeper, something raw. As they moved, the mirrors began to shift, showing them not just what they were, but what they could become. The reflections of Elias flickered, showing him as the powerful alpha king he had once been, but then twisted into darker, more monstrous versions of himself, each one reflecting a different fear, a different regret. His expression faltered as he saw himself as a ruthless, unfeeling ruler, consumed by the curse, his humanity lost in the darkness. Lana's heart tightened in her chest as she watched Elias struggle against the images. "Elias, you're not this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the deafening silence of the chamber. But Elias didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the mirror, his jaw clenched as though he were battling something deep within himself. And then, the mirrors shifted again, showing Lana. She saw herself in the reflection, but it wasn't the person she was now. The image before her was cold, distant, unfeeling. It was a version of herself that had given up, a woman who had become consumed by rejection and sorrow, letting the pain define her. "No," Lana whispered, taking a step back. "That's not who I am. I won't let it be." The reflection seemed to mock her, smiling with a cruel twist, but Lana refused to back down. She turned to Elias, her voice trembling with emotion. "We can't let these images control us. We're not what we fear, Elias. We're not what the curse wants us to be." Elias finally turned to her, his eyes dark with the weight of the trial. "But what if we are?" he asked, his voice strained. "What if this is who we've always been, who were destined to become. Lana shook her head, her grip tightening on his hand. No, Elias. You're not that man, and neither am I. We've changed. We've fought too hard to let this define us. The mirrors flickered once more, but this time, the reflections began to blur, the images fading into the shadows. The chamber fell silent, and the pressure that had been suffocating them eased, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. The trial had been a test of their resolve, a challenge to see if they could overcome the darkness inside them. And they had passed. The voice that had filled the chamber now spoke again, softer, but no less powerful. You have proven your strength, it said. Your hearts are strong enough to face the truth of your desires, and you have chosen not to be defined by the past. Proceed to the next trial. A door materialized before them, its surface glowing with an inner light. They had passed the second trial, but neither of them felt triumphant. Not yet. There was still one final trial to face, and they both knew it would be the hardest of all. But for the first time, as they stood together in the quiet aftermath of the trial, Lana felt a surge of hope. She wasn't afraid anymore, not with Elias by her side, and together, they would face whatever came next. The final trial loomed before them, more daunting than any challenge they had faced thus far. The door before them opened slowly, revealing a vast, empty space that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. The air was thick with an almost tangible sense of foreboding, as though the very atmosphere was waiting for them to step inside. Elias and Lana exchanged a glance, their expressions filled with determination and a quiet resolve. They had come so far, and they could not afford to fail now. As they crossed the threshold into the unknown, the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening crash. The world around them seemed to shift, the ground beneath their feet giving way to a swirling abyss. For a moment, it felt as though they were falling, weightless and suspended in time. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation stopped, and they found themselves standing in the center of a massive, circular chamber. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of battles, victories, and losses, all etched into the stone with a mastery that spoke of ancient power. In the center of the room stood a pedestal upon which rested a glowing crystal, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, but there was something unsettling about it, something that made Lana's heart race. This is it, Elias whispered, his voice filled with awe. The heart of the curse. They approached the pedestal slowly, each step heavier than the last, as though the weight of the world was pressing down upon them. The closer they got to the crystal, the more Lana could feel its power, radiating outward like waves of heat. She could feel it in her bones, in the pit of her stomach. It was as though the crystal was calling to her, beckoning her to touch it, to claim it. But as her hand reached out toward the crystal, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and commanding. To break the curse, you must sacrifice what you hold most dear, the voice intoned. Only then will you be freed from the darkness. Lana froze, her heart skipping a beat. Sacrifice? What could she possibly have to sacrifice? Elias's hand found hers, his grip firm and steady. We don't know what this means, he said softly, his voice laced with uncertainty. But we have to trust that this is the final step. We've come this far together. We'll make it through this. Lana looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had already sacrificed so much, her own sense of self, her place in the world, and the belief that she could ever truly be loved. But now, standing here with Elias, she realized there was one thing left that she had never truly let go of. Her fear of being alone, of losing everything, of failing in the face of something so powerful. And now, the choice was clear. To break the curse, she had to let go of that fear. She had to trust that no matter what, they would face the future together. With a deep breath, Lana stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact with the smooth surface, a surge of energy flooded through her, and the room around them began to shimmer and warp. The crystal pulsed with light, and the shadows that had lingered in the corners of the chamber began to retreat. The voice echoed again, this time softer, as though it was fading. The curse is broken. You are free. A wave of warmth washed over them, and the oppressive darkness that had haunted Elias for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a lightness he had not felt in years. He turned to Lana, his eyes filled with gratitude and wonder. "It's over," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We did it. The curse is broken." Tears filled Lana's eyes as she reached out to him, pulling him into an embrace. The weight of everything they had been through, every trial, every fear, every moment of doubt, seemed to melt away in that instant. They were free. Free from the curse, free from the darkness that had once defined them both. And in that moment, standing in the heart of the temple, Lana knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. Together, they had faced the impossible and come out stronger for it. The world was theirs to shape, and whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The trials were over, but their story was just beginning. With the curse broken and the weight of their trials lifted, Elias and Lana stepped out of the temple, the first rays of dawn illuminating the path before them. The air was crisp, fresh, and full of possibility. The dark clouds that had once loomed overhead were now nothing more than a distant memory, and in their place was a sky so clear it almost felt unreal. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elias felt a sense of peace settle within him. The curse that had defined his life for so long, the darkness that had consumed him and kept him isolated from the world, was gone, and standing beside him, Lana was his anchor, the one person who had never given up on him, no matter how lost he had seemed. She had been his light, his guide, and now they were both free. As they walked through the forest together, their hands intertwined, Elias glanced over at Lana, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I never thought I would feel this way again," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "For so long, I was trapped in the darkness, unable to see the light. But you brought that light back into my life. I don't know how to thank you for that." Lana smiled softly, her eyes meeting his. "You don't have to thank me, Elias. You've always had the strength to overcome the darkness. You just needed someone to believe in you. And I always will." Elias squeezed her hand, his heart full of emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing for certain. We will face it together. Whatever comes next, I want you by my side." Lana's heart fluttered in her chest as she looked up at him. "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else," she replied, her voice steady, filled with the same resolve. The world ahead of them was uncertain, filled with new challenges and unknowns, but for the first time in a long time, they felt ready. They had faced the impossible and come out stronger for it. They had broken the curse, and in doing so, they had found something even more powerful, each other. Together, they had proven that love, trust, and the willingness to fight for what truly mattered could conquer even the darkest of forces. The sun rose higher in the sky as they walked forward, their future stretching out before them like a blank canvas, ready to be filled with their story. The trials were behind them, but their journey had only just begun. And with each step they took, they knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would always have each other. In a world where werewolves rule the shadows, a rejected Omega and a cursed Alpha King find themselves on a journey that will change their lives forever. As their paths intertwine, they must face powerful trials, confront their deepest fears, and battle against an ancient curse that has held the Alpha King in its grip for years. In this werewolf tale of redemption and love, the bond between the two grows stronger with every challenge they face together. The werewolf world they navigate is filled with danger, mystery, and heart-stopping action, but also with moments of tenderness, as the Omega's belief in the Alpha King breaks through the darkness of his past. Together, they uncover the true power of their connection, fighting not only for their survival, but for a chance at a future filled with love and freedom. Will they be able to break the curse that haunts the Werewolf King, or will they be consumed by the forces working against them? This werewolf story is a journey of sacrifice, trust, and the undeniable strength of the bond between a rejected Omega and the Alpha King who has long been trapped by his own curse. Follow their incredible story as they challenge the odds and fight to break free from the chains of their past, proving that love is the ultimate power in a world ruled by werewolves.